All right, what's going on, Giants fans? Bobby Skinner talking Giants, reacting to the Giants' initial 53-man roster. Before we get into it all, make sure to like and subscribe. But the Giants' 53-man roster is done. One of the more even ones that I've ever looked at, where it's legit 25 offense, 25 defense, and then 3 specials. We'll see. They kept 3 QBs with Jones, Locke, and DeVito. That's the headline. Interesting that Isaiah Hodgins is gone. So we're going to go through all of it. This is the initial 53. Another reminder, though, in this is that the Giants are going to change this a lot, in my opinion. Right? I think they will be the team that uses the waiver wire the most. I think at edge, at defensive line, at corner, at even wide receiver when you think of returners, and I think even offensive line, they're gonna they're gonna really start to try and churn this. But the first thing that grabs everyone's attention is Tommy DeVito making the team, and I'm usually pretty anti 3 quarterback guy, and there is like some other guys I'd rather have than having the third quarterback, but it does make sense for the Giants to do it outside of the fact that like Tommy DeVito's a local star, right? Because he is. You go out to these events, he's a star out there, but maybe just maybe some other teams bought into him last year and wanted him as their QB2. I don't know if that's true or not, but there is a chance that happened out there. And then you have Drew Lock, who's currently injured. Daniel Jones is coming off of a neck injury and a torn ACL. And the 2 years of this regime, they've needed their QB3 or needed a QB3 at some point. Even 2022, that Chicago Bears game, Daniel Jones gets his ankle sprained, and then Tyrod Taylor was concussed. They had to play the final 3 drives with DJ just handing it off. Imagine if they were down by 3 in that game. That could have been the difference of them making the playoffs or not that year. Now DJ was healthy the next week, and that issue didn't arise. But last year, Daniel Jones and Tyrod Taylor both missed time. DeVito had to go in relief 3 separate times, plus the 6 games where he just had to start for them. And he's had over a year in the offense. So it makes sense for Tommy DeVito to be your QB3. So if there's one team that it makes sense, this is the one. Here's the decision I disagree with the most. And the disclaimer is that he's a vested veteran, so he may not be gone. But I do think this guy needs to be on the active roster for every single week of the season. And that's fullback Jakob Johnson, right? He is a vested veteran, so he's not subjected to waivers. Nobody can claim him. But with the new rule that players can return from IR pre 53-man roster, kind of removes the reason to do a lot of these roster gymnastics. Again, it's not over. They may put him back on the practice squad for a couple weeks. I don't know. But here's what I do know is I think he needs to be on this active roster for every single game of the year. In past years, they would cut like Casey Kreider and then move guys to IR. I don't see that happening this year. Jakob Johnson has been with Carmen Bracillo for his entire career in New England and in Las Vegas. And Bracillo, who is like, hey, we're talking about him changing the offensive line and helping the run game. He has coaching clinics out there about the importance of the fullback in the run game. Even in preseason, you saw how it helped, right? This most recent game, there was a play that would have been a tackle for a loss, and it turned into a 3-yard gain because Jakob Johnson picks up the defensive lineman in the backfield. They're a 4th and 2 toss. You see that. And the fullbacks not being needed, or being outdated, is actually an outdated take at this point, right? Like the top 4 offenses last year in the NFL used a fullback, and 3 of them, the Dolphins, 49ers, and Ravens, used it prominently, like big roles of Kyle Juszczyk, Patrick Ricard, and Alex Ingold, right? Don't we view those offensive coordinators or those head coaches, Kyle Shanahan and Mike McDaniel, as innovators in offensive football? Yeah, those guys truly value the fullback, and I do too. And I think this team that had an awful run game last year, right, had so many negative runs, held Saquon Barkley for less than 4 yards per carry, could use this guy. I think every NFL team should be doing it. So again, maybe he's back at some point, but he needs to be on the active roster, in my opinion. Like, he needs to be playing. He needs to gain snaps essentially every single week. The other big names was Isaiah Hodgins and Allen Robinson. The wide receivers were cut. It sounds weird, but both of them being cut makes me feel a little bit better than if they just had kept Allen Robinson over Isaiah Hodgins, because I do value Hodgins much more than Allen Robinson. Both of their roles would be wide receiver 5 with no special teams contribution, which I understand. It does make it hard to put those guys on the roster, right? That's why I can't kick and scream against this move, because it is kind of hard to justify that. But Isaiah Hodgins is a limited player, but I think he's really useful, right? He's a vet minimum contract. He's 25 years old. He had 3 touchdowns last year after leading them in 2022, right? You know, the only guys who had more than him last year were Saquon and Slayton, who both had 4 receiving touchdowns. And he gives you value when he's on the field, right? He gives you value in the quick game, in the red zone. He's a great teammate. He has good hands. You know, his 1.4 yards per route run in 2022, which would have actually been more than any wide receiver on the 2023 Giants, although he was behind Slayton, Wandale, and James that year in 2022. And I wanted to have a position that had just really, really good depth, right? Like they're one wide receiver injury away from him being the best option to put on the field in the red zone. Isn't the red zone kind of a big deal? Like if Malik Neighbors or Darius Slayton gets injured, I want Isaiah Hodgins out there in the red zone more so than Jalen Hyatt. He gives you more down there. And you're 2 injuries away, right? I know the wide receiver room stayed healthy last year, but you're 2 injuries away from having a reliable guy that you can start. So we'll see what he wants, if he wants to go and try his luck somewhere else. Obviously, he shouldn't be a top 3, a starting wide receiver on a good team, right? Understandable. But I thought he was really good depth. I would have liked to keep him around, and hopefully they can keep him on the practice squad. Other moves, they kept Deontay Johnson, the linebacker. Now they kept 6 linebackers. You'll see. Let me pull up the graphic again. They had Bobby Okereke and Micah McFadden. Those guys are the starters. Darius Moasa was a draft pick, so that makes sense. Isaiah Simmons, who's like their third down money backer. Matthew Adams and Carter Coughlin, who are special teams guys. And Deontay Johnson. And I'm really happy they kept Deontay Johnson. It's important to me that he made the roster because he is someone that they could have let go to the practice squad, right? Nobody would have claimed Deontay Johnson off waivers. You know, he's a second-year UDFA. He only played 1 preseason game this year, dealing with a sprained ankle now. But when he is healthy and hopefully back soon, he is their first backup at linebacker after Bobby Okereke and Micah McFadden. And guess what? Micah McFadden is dealing with an injury. He had an injury in OTAs, and then he re-injured himself in the preseason. Like he's close to being a starter for this team and the beginning of the season. We know how important that is for the Giants. Like he was getting first team snaps and making the most of them all camp. You know, there's guys who, they're having a great camp just because they're having an elevated role, but they're not actually playing well. Johnson did. Like he was a baller in camp. And in the 1 preseason game, I mean, he was the defensive player of the game for me in that one. So I think it's important that he made the roster because the other linebackers are 3 special teamers in Adams, Coughlin, and Moasa. And then Isaiah Simmons is a third down only linebacker, you know, that money backer. Offensive line, this is one that I expect to change a little bit. Jake Kubis, the undrafted free agent out of North Dakota State, makes it. Him and Elijah Chapman are the only UDFAs to make it. He had a good camp. I hope that he's not put in a position to play this year. He is actually someone I would have let just go to the practice squad. Let him work at center and guard. I hope this is a redshirt year for him. I hope he's not put into a real role. They kept Austin Schlottman, which I like for now. I would like to upgrade that spot, but I like having someone as a backup who's actually played center in the NFL, right? And is practicing at center week in, week out in their practices. Even if they change it the next game, if Jameis gets injured and the next game they put Greg Van Roten at center. Even if they do that, I would like for the game that Jameis gets injured, you can put someone in there who's actually been practicing and preparing at center. So they kept their 5 starters, those 2 guys, Schlottman and Kubis, Stinney, their first guard up, and then Evan Neal and Josh Azudu as tackles. Other notes, edge depth chart, they cut Timon Fox, keep Boogie Basham and Benton Whitley. That's another position I can see them looking to upgrade in waivers. Neither one of those guys inspires a lot of confidence in me, even though Whitley gives you that special teams value and did have a good preseason. And there's some final notes. Darnay Holmes cut after 4 years of service. 2020 4th rounder, started 3 years. I think that's like a decent investment, even though he wasn't what we wanted out of him. Trey Herndon was cut. I thought they might keep him. Bryce Ford Wheaton made the team, which, him and Daniel Jones actually stayed after practice on Tuesday because Daniel Jones, I don't think, has ever thrown a pass to Bryce Ford Wheaton in a practice. But he stays in like a special teams role, but he's technically like the 5th wide receiver with Isaiah McKenzie cut, with Isaiah Hodgins and Allen Robinson cut. Right, he's the 5th guy. They also kept Gunnar Olszewski, who I think it's really important to keep him as long as he's not injured for a long time because he's really valuable as a punt returner. And then they cut Javarius Owens, which they had him go out to practice, and they're like, we have 54 guys out here, and then they sent them back in. Kind of a brutal way to cut him. Another guy who I do think will end up back on the practice squad, 7th round pick a year ago. I love Javarius Owens, right? I'm like known as the Javarius Owens guy, but he just keeps dealing with injuries. Every time he plays in the preseason or camp, he does play well, but he's just dealt with a lot of injuries, and it's hard to make your case for a spot, even though as much as I like him. So I hope he finds his chance eventually. But he is, again, another guy who I see being on the practice squad, and I'm fine with that. So hope you guys enjoyed the video. Like and subscribe to the channel. Giants are going to be adding players, so we're going to be hitting you with a bunch of stuff, right? You're going to want to know who these new guys are. We're going to do the best job telling you who those guys are. So we appreciate you. Like and subscribe. See you in the next one. Until then, let's go Big Blue.